A millionaire rescues a desperate mother on a rainy night. A company hides secrets that connect their lives in an indescribable way. The search for a missing son reveals betrayals and conspiracies from the past. An old diary uncovers truths that could change everything. The rain lashed the streets of New York with an intensity rare even for a March night. Pedestrians ran for cover, while cars inched slowly along Fifth Avenue, their headlights reflecting in the puddles forming on the asphalt. In his office on the top floor of one of the avenue's most imposing buildings, William Thompson watched the storm through the panoramic window, his stern face illuminated by occasional flashes of lightning. At 45, William had built an empire. Thompson Enterprises was one of the largest companies in the country, and his name was synonymous with success and power. Yet that night, something troubled him. His secretary's words still echoed in his mind. "Mr. Thompson, some irregularities have been found in the company's old files." Sighing, he grabbed his coat and decided to leave. The day had been too long, and that lingering sense of unease wouldn't leave him. As he exited the building, his driver was already waiting with an umbrella open, but William gestured for him to leave. "You can go, John. I want to drive today." That's when he saw her. A woman was running desperately along the sidewalk, her dark hair soaked by the rain, shouting a name he couldn't quite make out. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and William felt something he hadn't experienced in years: compassion. "Michael! Michael!" the woman screamed, her voice choked with desperation. She seemed not to care about the rain or the glances of the few passers-by still braving the storm. Her face was streaked with tears that mingled with the rainwater. William hesitated for a moment. His life was governed by rules and protocols, and getting involved with strangers was definitely not part of his routine. Yet something about that woman touched him deeply. Perhaps it was her eyes which carried a pain so visceral it was almost palpable. "Ma'am!" he called, running toward her. "Ma'am, wait!" The woman continued her frantic search, dangerously close to the street. A car sped by, splashing through a puddle and nearly hitting her. William, on impulse, managed to reach her and pull her back. "Let me go, I need to find my son." She struggled in his arms, her voice breaking with anguish. "Please, calm down." "Let me help." The words came out of his mouth before he could think. "I'm William Thompson. What's your name?" She stopped struggling and stared at him, her red eyes revealing hours of crying. "Elizabeth Carter." The name caused a slight tremor in William, though he couldn't explain why. "Elizabeth, it's raining really hard. Come with me to my car and you can tell me what happened. I can help you look for your son." Elizabeth hesitated, but another thunderclap cut through the sky, making her shiver. William gently guided her to his imported car, parked near the building. Inside the vehicle, the silence was broken only by the sound of rain against the metal and Elizabeth's occasional sobs. "Michael. My son. He disappeared this afternoon. I've looked everywhere, called all his friends, the school." Her voice faltered as she tried to organize her thoughts. "He's only 12. William started the car and adjusted the heater, watching as Elizabeth trembled, soaked to the bone. "How long exactly has he been missing?" "Since 3 in the afternoon. He was supposed to come back from school." Elizabeth ran her hands over her face, trying to dry the tears that wouldn't stop falling. "But when I got home, he wasn't there. The doorman said he didn't see him come in. I already went to the police, but they said they need to wait 24 hours. Something about the story didn't sit right with William. His years of experience in business had taught him to recognize when there was more beneath the surface. "Elizabeth, tell me something. Has anything unusual happened in the past few days? Any changes in Michael's routine?" Elizabeth's expression shifted subtly, and William realized he had touched on something important. She hesitated before answering, her hands nervously clutching the wet bag in her lap. "Actually," Elizabeth began, her voice trembling slightly, "Michael has been acting differently these past few weeks, quieter, more distant. I thought it was just his age. You know how pre-teens can be." She paused, trying to gather her thoughts. "But last night, I overheard him talking on the phone. When I asked who he was speaking to, he quickly hung up and said it was just a classmate from school." William listened intently as he drove through the rain-soaked streets of New York. The rain continued to pour relentlessly, but his mind was focused on Elizabeth's words. Years of negotiations had taught him to recognize when someone was hiding something. "Elizabeth, I need you to be completely honest with me if you want my help. Is there something else you're not telling me?" She looked at him, her eyes revealing a mix of fear and hesitation. "You're going to think I'm crazy. Try me," William replied, maintaining the calm and professional tone that had helped him build his empire. "3 days ago, I received an anonymous letter," Elizabeth began, her voice barely above a whisper. "It said that I should stay away from certain people, that I should stop asking questions about the past. And there was a photo of Michael leaving school." William felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of questions about the past? Elizabeth took a deep breath as if gathering courage. 10 years ago, I owned a promising tech company, Tech Carter. We were small, but we had innovative projects, especially in sustainable energy. Then, out of nowhere, we started facing problems. Contracts were cancelled, investors mysteriously backed out, and within less than a year, we lost everything. William felt his heart race. The name Tech Carter stirred a distant memory, something he had seen in old documents from Thompson Enterprises. At the time, Michael was only 2 years old. I fought with everything I had to keep the company afloat, but it was as if an invisible force was working against us. When we finally went bankrupt, I discovered that all our projects, all our research, had been bought out by a larger conglomerate. "Which conglomerate?" William asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Thompson Holdings Group," Helena replied, not noticing the sudden tension on Ricardo's face. "But that's not the worst part. After the bankruptcy, my ex-husband managed to get custody of Michael, claiming I wasn't fit to raise him. Those were the worst years of my life. I only regained custody 2 years ago after a long fight." Ricardo parked the car in front of a cafe that was still open. The rain had eased a bit, but thunder still occasionally split the sky. His mind raced, connecting dots he would have preferred to keep separate. "In the last few months, I started investigating what really happened to my company. I found documents, talked to former employees. There's something very wrong with this story, Mr. Thompson. And now, just when I was close to uncovering something important, my son goes missing." Ricardo kept his expression neutral, years of practice in corporate meetings helping him mask his inner turmoil. He knew better than anyone that Thompson Holdings had a history of aggressive acquisitions during his father's tenure. But he had never delved into the details, preferring to focus on the company's future after taking control. "Helena, I'll help you find your son," he finally said, his voice firm. "I have resources, contacts, we can start right now. But I need you to trust me and tell me absolutely everything you've discovered in your investigation." She looked at him with a mix of hope and suspicion. "Why are you willing to help me? You don't know me." "Let's just say I have my reasons," Ricardo replied, thinking of the file he had found earlier that day, a document that briefly mentioned Tech Carter. "And maybe, by helping you, I can better understand some things about my own company." Helena's phone vibrated, making her jump. It was a message from an unknown number. Her hands trembled as she read the text, and her face grew even paler. "He's safe. Stop looking if you want him to stay that way." Helena read the message aloud, her hands shaking so much she almost dropped the phone. There's a photo?" Ricardo leaned over to see the phone screen. The image showed Michael asleep on an unfamiliar couch, still wearing his school uniform. In the background, a window with blue curtains could be seen, and through it the same storm that was battering the city. "The photo is recent," William observed, his experienced eyes catching every detail. "Elizabeth, we need to proceed with caution. Whoever has Michael wants something specific from you." Elizabeth put away her phone with trembling hands. "But what? I've already lost everything I had. What else could they want from me?" "Maybe it's not something you have, but something you know," William replied thoughtfully, starting the car again. "You mentioned you were investigating the past. What exactly did you find?" Elizabeth hesitated for a moment, watching the rain through the car window. 3 months ago, I found a former employee of Tech Carter, Robert Alvarez. He was our CFO, and always suspected that the company's bankruptcy wasn't natural. Robert told me that in the weeks leading up to the collapse, he received several strange calls. William drove slowly through the wet streets, paying attention to every word. What kind of calls? Offers. Someone wanted to buy our sustainable energy patents for a price well below market value. When we refused, the problems began. Robert kept a detailed journal of everything that happened back then. He promised to give it to me, but last week when I went to meet him, Robert had disappeared. His apartment was empty, as if he had never existed. The neighbors said he moved out overnight without telling anyone. William felt a weight in his stomach. The name Robert Alvarez was somehow familiar to him too. Elizabeth, I think we need to go to your house. There might be something there that helps us better understand this situation. As he drove to the address Elizabeth provided, William made a few discreet calls. As the president of Thompson Enterprises, he had access to resources most people couldn't even imagine. Within minutes, he obtained information about the security cameras near Michael's school. Helena's apartment was located in a modest neighborhood in the southern part of New York. It was an old building without a doorman, with a facade that was clearly in need of a fresh coat of paint. As they entered the small third-floor apartment, William was immediately struck by the welcoming simplicity of the place. Photos of Michael adorned the walls, telling the story of a happy childhood despite the hardships. It's amazing how everything seems so normal, Elizabeth murmured, looking around. As if my son could walk through that door at any moment. William observed the surroundings with analytical eyes. Elizabeth, you mentioned that Robert kept a journal. Did he ever say where he stored that information? He always wore a red flash drive around his neck, Elizabeth replied, sitting down on the couch. He said he had backups of everything in a safe place, but he never told me where. At that moment, William's phone vibrated. It was a message from his security team. They had found footage from the cameras near the school. Elizabeth, come take a look at this. In the video, recorded at 3 p.m. that day, Michael was seen leaving the school as usual. However, instead of following his usual route, he willingly got into a black car. There didn't seem to be any coercion. I don't understand, Elizabeth stammered, confused. Michael would never get into a stranger's car. He knows better than that. Maybe it wasn't a stranger, William suggested gently. Do you recognize the car? Elizabeth furrowed, her brow focusing on the image. No, but wait. She ran to her room and returned with a shoebox. Inside were dozens of old photos. Here! It was a photo of the old parking lot at Tech Carter. In the background, partially visible, was a car very similar to the one in the video. That car, it belonged to Victor, my ex-husband. But it can't be the same one. It's been so long. Ricardo picked up his phone again, typing quickly. What's your ex-husband's full name? Victor Allen Taylor, Elizabeth replied, her voice trembling slightly. He disappeared 5 years ago. No one knows where he went. Ricardo's fingers stopped typing abruptly. That name, he had seen it somewhere recently. It was then that the memory hit him like a lightning bolt. Victor Taylor was on the list of external consultants for Thompson Enterprises, hired exactly 5 years ago. Ricardo kept the discovery to himself for now. His instinct told him there was much more to this story than met the eye, and he needed to be cautious. Elizabeth, I need to make some calls. Do you have something that Michael uses often? Something personal? Elizabeth nodded and went to her son's room, returning with a laptop. He uses it to study and play games. Lately, he spent a lot of time here. Ricardo carefully took the computer. At his company, he had an exceptional tech team, and he knew they could find important clues in Michael's browsing history. However, before he could do anything, Elizabeth's phone rang again. This time, it was a call, private number. Elizabeth looked at Ricardo, who gave a nod of approval. She answered, putting it on speaker. Elizabeth. The male voice on the other end sounded distorted, as if it was being altered by a modifier. I imagine you've already received our previous message. Where is my son? Elizabeth asked, her voice trembling but firm. Michael is fine, and he will remain so if you cooperate. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., go to Cafe Aroma on Broadway. Sit at the back table and wait. Come alone. I want to talk to him, Elizabeth demanded. There was a pause on the other end. You're in no position to make demands, Elizabeth, but as a gesture of good faith. The voice changed and then, "Mom? Michael!" Elizabeth cried, tears streaming down her face. "Son, are you okay?" "I'm fine, Mom. Don't worry." Michael's voice was cut off, and the distorted voice returned. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., alone." The call ended. Elizabeth collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing. William approached, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I'm not letting you go alone." "But they said—" "Trust me," William interrupted gently. "I have resources they can't even imagine. But first, we need to better understand who we're up against." William grabbed his phone and made a quick call. "Marcia, I need you to come to the address I'm about to send you. Bring the digital analysis equipment." And Marcia, utmost discretion. As they waited, William began mentally sifting through his business connections. Victor Allen Taylor, the name kept echoing in his mind. As a consultant for Thompson Enterprises, he had access to sensitive information. Could there be a connection between his current work and his past with Tech Carter? 30 minutes later, Marcia arrived. She was a young woman with a discreet appearance, carrying a case of equipment. Without asking questions, she began analyzing Michael's notebook. "Mr. Thompson," she called after a few minutes, "I think I found something interesting." On the screen was a chat history from a messaging app. Michael had been in contact with someone who identified themselves only as V over the past few weeks. The conversations seemed casual at first, but gradually became more personal. "He claimed to be an old friend of mine," Elizabeth murmured, reading the messages. "He told Michael stories about when I was a businesswoman. Said he wanted to help retell our family history." William watched the messages with growing attention. This V knew specific details about Elizabeth's past, things only someone very close would know. In one of the last conversations, they had arranged to meet Michael after school to show him something important about his mother. "Elizabeth," William began cautiously, "you said Victor disappeared 5 years ago. What was his relationship with Michael like before that?" "Complicated," she replied, running her hands over her tired face. "Victor was always manipulative. After we lost the company, he changed. He became obsessed with the idea that I had hidden something valuable from Tech Carter. When he got custody of Michael, he barely let me see my son. But then, he just vanished." Marcia continued her work silently until something else caught her attention. "There's an email here sent 3 days ago from a corporate server." William moved closer to the screen and his heart nearly stopped. The email had been sent from an internal domain of Thompson Enterprises. "Elizabeth," he said, his voice serious, "I think I know who's behind this, and if I'm right, tomorrow might be our only chance to resolve this situation." Elizabeth's phone vibrated again. Another message from the unknown number. "Bring the red flash drive tomorrow." "We know you have it." Elizabeth looked at William, confused. "But I don't have any flash drive. Robert never gave me one." William, however, had turned pale. On his desk in the office was a brown envelope that had arrived that morning. Inside it, along with documents about the company's past irregularities, was a small red flash drive. William gazed out the window of his office, watching the rising sun paint the horizon of New York with orange hues. The night had been long, filled with unsettling discoveries. After dropping Elizabeth off at her apartment, with 2 trusted security guards discreetly stationed in the building, he had returned to Thompson Enterprises to investigate the red flash drive. The contents were more explosive than he could have imagined. Robert Alvarez, the former CFO of Tech Carter, had meticulously documented every step of the operation that destroyed Elizabeth's company. Emails, bank transfers, records of secret meetings. It was all there, forming a puzzle that revealed an uncomfortable truth about the empire William had inherited. "Your coffee, sir." Anna, his trusted secretary, entered the room quietly. She had worked at the company for over 20 years and had served both William and his father faithfully. "I also brought the documents you requested from the old archives." William nodded, taking the steaming cup. "Anna, do you remember Tech Carter?" The secretary paused for a moment, her face showing a slight hesitation. "Yes, sir. It was one of your father's last projects before he retired." Project? William raised an eyebrow. That's an interesting way to describe the systematic destruction of a company. Anna looked away, uncomfortable. It was a different time, sir. Your father believed he was doing what was necessary for the company's growth. Necessary? William let out a bitter laugh. Destroying a woman's life and separating a mother from her child was necessary? He shook his head, picking up an old folder from his desk. I just spent the night going through these documents. Do you know what I found out? Tech Carter had revolutionary technology in sustainable energy. Technology that could have transformed the market, benefited millions of people. But my father, and he didn't want the technology to use it. He wanted it to bury it. Anna remained silent, her hands clasped in front of her. William continued, his voice filled with a mix of anger and sadness. And do you know what's worse? Victor Taylor, Elizabeth's ex-husband, has been working for us for 5 years. He was hired right after he managed to take her son away. It's all part of the same dirty plan. Sir, Anna began hesitantly, there's something I need to tell you about Victor Taylor. William turned his attention to his secretary, noticing how nervous she seemed, something rare in her always professional demeanor. Victor came to the office yesterday before you arrived. He was agitated. He demanded to speak with you about some old documents. When I told him he'd need to schedule an appointment, he started making threats. He said he had information that could destroy the company, that he knew things. Your father had done. William felt his heart race. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? He scared me, sir. And then Robert Alvarez showed up. Robert, he was here too? Anna nodded. It was a very tense moment. The two of them argued in the hallway. Robert accused Victor of stealing something from him, and Victor said he was just fixing past mistakes. I ended up calling security and they left. But before leaving, Victor said he would return, that he had a trump card no one expected. William ran his hands over his face, processing the information. The trump card was Michael. Victor had manipulated his own son to get something, probably the flash drive that was now in William's possession. Anna, I need you to do something for me. Find everything you can about Victor Taylor's activities at the company over the last 5 years. Every project, every meeting, every email, and also, he hesitated for a moment, I need you to look through my father's personal files. There must be something about the real reason he wanted to destroy Tech Carter. The secretary nodded and quickly left the room. William checked his watch, 8:30 a.m. In less than 2 hours, Elizabeth was supposed to meet Michael's kidnappers at the cafe. But now, with all this new information, he had a plan. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. Elizabeth, I found something you need to see, and I think I know exactly how we're going to get your son back. On the other end of the line, Elizabeth replied with a determined voice, I'm on my way, and William, thank you for not giving up on helping me. William looked out the window again, watching the city wake up. Elizabeth, when all this is over, I have something important to tell you. About my father, about your company, about everything. Café Aroma was a discreet establishment on Broadway, frequented mainly by students and local professionals. At 9:45 a.m., Elizabeth was sitting at the back table, exactly as instructed, her hands trembling slightly as she held an untouched cup of coffee. William had insisted on a meticulous plan. He himself was at a table on the other side of the cafe, disguised with sunglasses and a newspaper, looking like just another executive having breakfast. 4 other security guards were strategically positioned inside and outside the establishment, all in plain clothes. Stay calm, William's voice came softly through the small earpiece Elizabeth was wearing. Remember what we agreed on. No matter what happens, don't hand over the flash drive until we see Michael. Elizabeth nodded discreetly, adjusting the strap of her bag, where a copy of the red flash drive was stored. The original remained safely in William's vault, its data already carefully analyzed and copied. At exactly 10 o'clock, the door of the cafe opened. Elizabeth felt her heart skip a beat when Victor entered, even thinner than she remembered, but with the same calculating gaze as always. He wasn't alone. An older man accompanied him, someone Elizabeth recognized immediately. "Robert?" She whispered, incredulous. William, from his position, also watched the scene with growing interest. Robert Alvarez, the former financial director, who had supposedly disappeared, was now there, looking nervous and uncomfortable. Victor approached Elizabeth's table, a cold smile on his lips. "Long time, Elizabeth. You look... well. Where's Michael?" Elizabeth asked directly, her voice firmer than she expected. "Always straight to the point, aren't you?" Victor sat down across from her, while Robert remained standing, restless. "Michael is safe, with people we trust. But before we talk about him, we need to discuss some matters from the past." "What matters?" Elizabeth kept her hands under the table to hide their trembling. "The flash drive, Elizabeth. I know Robert gave it to you. On it is everything we need to finally bring justice." Robert cleared his throat nervously. "Victor, this wasn't part of the deal. You said you just wanted to scare—" "Quiet!" Victor snapped without taking his eyes off Elizabeth. "Where is the flash drive?" Elizabeth took a deep breath, following William's plan. "Why are you doing this, Victor? What happened to you? We're talking about your own son." "Our son is fine," Victor replied, his tone subtly shifting. "In fact, he understands more than you realize. Do you know why I'm doing this? Because all these years you never realized what really happened. Tech Carter wasn't destroyed by Thompson Enterprises. It was saved." William, at his desk, leaned slightly forward, intrigued by this unexpected revelation. "What are you talking about?" Elizabeth asked, genuinely confused. "Your precious sustainable energy technology," Victor continued, lowering his voice. "Did you never notice the risks? The project had serious flaws, Elizabeth. If it had gone to market, it could have caused terrible accidents. I tried to warn you, but you were so obsessed with success." Robert intervened again, his voice trembling. "He's lying, Elizabeth. The technology was safe. I saw all the tests. Victor was working for Thompson Enterprises all along, from the very beginning. Victor stood up abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. "Enough! The flash drive, Elizabeth, now, or you'll never see Michael again." It was at that moment that the cafe door opened again. A 12-year-old boy rushed in, his eyes frantically scanning the room until they landed on Elizabeth. "Mom! Michael!" Elizabeth stood up, her legs shaky. Victor turned, stunned. "How—" William also stood up, removing his sunglasses. "Perhaps you should have checked your own security teams more carefully, Victor. Some of them have worked for me far longer than for you." The cafe sprang into motion. William's security team revealed themselves, blocking the exits. Robert Alvarez seemed on the verge of fainting, while Victor looked around, searching for an exit that didn't exist. Michael ran into Elizabeth's arms, and she held him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "My son, are you okay? Did they hurt you?" "No, Mom," Michael replied, still clinging to her. "But there's so much I need to tell you. About Dad, about what he told me." William's office at Thompson Enterprises had turned into an impromptu operations center. Elizabeth was seated on the leather couch, Michael still clinging to her, as if he feared his mother might disappear at any moment. Victor and Robert had been taken to separate rooms under the discreet watch of William's security team. "Michael," Elizabeth stroked her son's hair, "why did you get in the car? You know you shouldn't." "Dad showed me old photos," Michael answered, his voice small. "From the Tech Carter days. He said he found out you were in danger. That bad. People wanted to hurt you because of some old documents. He convinced me I needed to protect you." William, who was leaning against his desk observing the scene, exchanged a meaningful look with Elizabeth. Victor's manipulation had been meticulous, using their son's love for his mother against them. "Mr. Thompson," Anna entered the room carrying an old folder. "I found what you asked for in your father's personal files." William took the folder carefully. Inside were documents yellowed with age, including a personal journal from Augustus Thompson, his father. As he flipped through the pages, his face grew increasingly pale. "Elizabeth," he called after a few minutes of silent reading, "I think I've discovered why my father was so interested in your company." He paused, organizing his thoughts. "The sustainable energy technology you developed, it wasn't just revolutionary, it was personal to him." "How so?" Elizabeth asked, intrigued. My father had a younger brother, Theodore. They grew up together in the countryside of New York, sons of a small merchant. Theodore was brilliant, studied engineering, had big dreams. William consulted the diary again. In 1985, he developed a project very similar to yours, Elizabeth, a way to generate clean energy that could revolutionize the market. Michael adjusted himself on the couch, clearly interested in the story. William continued. But there were problems. The technology wasn't fully developed, and an accident during the tests. He paused, carefully choosing his words. Theodore was deeply shaken. He abandoned everything, moved abroad. My father never forgave him for giving up on their dream. And what does this have to do with Tech Carter? Elizabeth asked, though she was already starting to understand the connection. When my father saw your technology, Elizabeth, he recognized elements of his brother's project. He became obsessed with the idea that you had somehow obtained Theodore's research. But that wasn't true, was it? William stared at her intently. Elizabeth shook her head. Impossible. We developed everything from scratch. I have all the research records to prove it. I know, William nodded. In fact, your technology solved exactly the problems that made Theodore's project fail. It was a natural but independent evolution. My father, however, couldn't see that. For him, it was a matter of family honor. And that's when Victor came in. A new voice joined the conversation. Robert Alvarez was standing at the door, escorted by a security guard. William gestured for him to enter. Explain, William ordered. Victor was ambitious, Robert began, sitting in a nearby chair. When Augustus Thompson approached him, offering a position in the company in exchange for insider information from Tech Carter, he didn't hesitate. But it wasn't just about corporate espionage. Dad always said he was protecting me, Michael suddenly interrupted. His voice choked. That Mom was obsessed with the company, that she didn't see the risks. But those were lies, weren't they? Elizabeth hugged her son tighter, silent tears streaming down her face. Yes, my love, they were lies. William flipped through a few more pages of the diary. My father used Victor not only to destroy Tech Carter, but to ensure the technology never saw the light of day. He truly believed he was protecting his brother's legacy, and in the process he destroyed innocent lives. And now? Elizabeth asked, her voice heavy with emotion. What happens? William closed the diary with a heavy sigh. Now, we do the right thing. Elizabeth, I want to propose something. Let's resurrect Tech Carter. Everyone in the room turned to him, surprised. William continued, not as a subsidiary of Thompson Enterprises, but as an independent company. You will have full control, with all the financial and structural support you need. Your technology can truly change the world, Elizabeth. It's time to leave the past behind and build a better future. And Victor? Michael asked, his voice small, but firm. Your father will have to answer for his actions, William replied gently, but I promise we will do it the right way, legally and fairly. Elizabeth looked at her son, then at William. Years of struggle, pain, and injustice seemed to finally be coming to an end. But before she could respond, Anna entered the room again, her face pale. Mr. Thompson, Victor. He's demanding to speak to everyone. He says he has one last revelation. That will change everything. Victor was sitting in the main conference room of Thompson Enterprises, his restless hands on the polished mahogany table. When Elizabeth, Michael, William, and Robert entered, he looked up, an enigmatic smile on his lips. So everyone is here, he said, his voice tired but firm. Good, because there's something you need to know, something not even Augustus Thompson knew. William gestured for everyone to sit down. The tension in the air was palpable, especially when Michael, reluctant, sat down next to his mother, as far away from his father as possible. Speak, William ordered. Victor took a deep breath, adjusting his posture. Elizabeth, you've always wondered how I got that job at Tech Carter, haven't you? A freshly graduated engineer, with no significant experience, hired as a project manager. Elizabeth furrowed her brow, old memories resurfacing. The board recommended you. They said you had exceptional references. Yes, but from whom? Victor smiled bitterly. Theodore Thompson. William leaned forward, suddenly alert. My uncle. Impossible. He was abroad. Not exactly, Victor continued. Theodore never went abroad. He changed his name, started a new life right here in Brazil, and in recent years he developed an obsession, perfecting his sustainable energy technology. Elizabeth covered her mouth with her hands, beginning to understand. Victor went on. When he found out that a small company was developing something similar, he became intrigued. He reached out to me. I was his student at the university, where he taught under a different name, and asked me to infiltrate Tech Carter. So, William processed the information slowly. When my father started going after Tech Carter, he didn't realize he was doing exactly what Theodore wanted, Victor finished. Theodore knew his original technology had flaws, but he couldn't overcome them. When he saw Elizabeth's work, he realized she had found the solutions he'd been searching for years. But instead of collaborating, he decided he wanted it all for himself. Michael, who had remained silent, finally spoke. Is that why you became obsessed with Mum's files? Because of that man? Victor looked at his son, something close to regret, flashing in his eyes. At first, yes, but later it became bigger than that. I truly believed I was protecting all of you. Theodore, he wasn't the person everyone knew anymore. Obsession had changed him. And where is he now? William asked, though he suspected the answer. He vanished 3 months ago when he found out that Robert had uncovered evidence of his involvement, Victor replied. But before that, he made me promise to prevent the technology from going public. He said it was too dangerous, that powerful people would do anything to control something like that. Elizabeth stood up abruptly, her hands trembling with anger. So you destroyed our family, manipulated our son, all because of the paranoia of a bitter man. No, Victor slammed the table. Don't you understand? Theodore was right about the risks, not of the technology itself, but of the people who wanted to control it. Why do you think Augustus Thompson managed to destroy Tech Carter so easily? He had help, powerful people who also wanted the technology buried. William exchanged a meaningful glance with Elizabeth. The implications were enormous. This wasn't just about family revenge or corporate espionage, but something much bigger. The flash drive, Robert interjected for the first time. It doesn't just contain records of Tech Carter's downfall. It has documents linking dozens of influential people to a conspiracy to halt the development of alternative energy. People who are still in power. Is that why you kidnapped Michael? Elizabeth asked, her voice trembling with outrage. To protect those people? No, Victor replied softly. To protect you. They found out you were digging into the past. And this time they wouldn't just destroy your company. A heavy silence fell over the room. William was the first to break it. So what do you suggest we do? Victor looked at each person present before answering. There is a way. But for it to work, we will all have to work together. And more importantly, we will have to trust each other. The sun was beginning to set over New York when the group finally emerged from the meeting room at Thompson Enterprises. After hours of intense discussions, a plan had been laid out. Bold, complex, but potentially revolutionary. So it's decided, William said, organizing a stack of documents on his desk. We will rebuild Tech Carter, but this time with the full backing of Thompson Enterprises. Elizabeth will be the CEO, with complete autonomy to develop the technology. Elizabeth, who was standing near the window with Michael, nodded. But we need to make sure this time is different. We can't allow the same people to interfere again. That's why we need to be strategic, Victor interjected, maintaining a respectful distance from his former family. His expression showed the weight of the last few hours of confessions and planning. The announcement needs to be big enough to attract media attention, but not so threatening as to provoke extreme reactions. Robert, who had spent the last hour typing on his laptop, looked up. I managed to access the old Tech Carter files that were on Thompson's servers. With that and the data from the flash drive, we can prove that the technology is safe and viable. William walked over to a large whiteboard where they had mapped out all the connections and events of the past few years. The trick will be to expose the obstacles we faced without directly revealing those responsible. We need to make them expose themselves. How? Michael asked, his young voice carrying a maturity forced by recent events. William smiled, a glimmer of his old, bolder negotiation days returning to his eyes, with a move they would never expect, total transparency. Anna entered the room carrying a tray with fresh coffee and water. As she served the drinks, William continued explaining his plan. We will make a public announcement, not just about the return of Tech Carter, but about the entire story, how the company was unfairly shut down, how the technology was suppressed, and how we are now correcting those past mistakes. But won't that alert them? Elizabeth asked, concerned. Exactly, William replied. But this time we'll be prepared. Every document, every piece of evidence we have will be made publicly available on a special website. Thousands of people will have access simultaneously. It will be impossible to suppress the information. Victor leaned over the table, studying. The documents. What about Theodore? He's still out there somewhere. That's why we need you, Victor, William said firmly. You're the only one who can find him, not to punish him, but to bring him back. His experience, even if tainted by obsession, could be valuable. Michael, who had remained quiet for a while, stepped closer to his father. Are you really going to help this time? No more lies? Victor looked at his son, unshed tears glistening in his eyes. Michael, everything I did, no matter how wrong, was to protect you and your mother. But now I see that the real danger was the secret, not the truth. I promise this time I'll do the right thing. Elizabeth watched the interaction between father and son with a complex mix of emotions. William, she called, how can we be sure we're not putting ourselves at risk again? William picked up his phone and showed a series of emails. Because this time we have allies. In the last few hours, I've reached out to investigative journalists, environmental NGOs, and even reformist politicians. They're all ready to support us. The story of Tech Carter won't just be about a company rising again. It will be about confronting a system that tries to suppress innovations that could benefit humanity. Robert stood up, carrying his laptop. I've finished organizing the data. We have enough evidence to prove every aspect of our story, including the sabotage attempts and the conspiracy to bury the technology. And I have one more card up my sleeve, William added, an enigmatic smile on his face. Something I found in my father's personal files. Something not even Theodore knows exists. Anna, who had been quietly organizing some papers, suddenly stopped. Mr. Thompson, you're not talking about Project Aurora, are you? All eyes turned to William, who nodded slowly. Exactly. Project Aurora. The real reason why so many powerful people wanted Tech Carter's technology suppressed, and tomorrow the whole world will know about it. The next morning dawned with an electric anticipation in the air. The main auditorium of Thompson Enterprises was packed. Journalists, environmentalists, executives, and curious onlookers squeezed in to uncover the reason for the mysterious last-minute summons. Backstage, Elizabeth adjusted the microphone. On her blazer, trying to control her nerves. Michael sat in a corner, flipping through a set of old documents with youthful fascination. Victor and Robert were reviewing the final details of the presentation on a laptop, while William spoke in hushed tones with his legal team. Is everything ready? Elizabeth asked, approaching William. He nodded, checking his watch. The website is live, protected by servers in 5 different countries. As soon as we make the announcement, all the documents will be released automatically. There's no turning back. Tell me more about Project Aurora, Elizabeth requested. Why is it so important? William glanced around, making sure they were alone. In 1982, long before Tech Carter existed, a group of scientists discovered a revolutionary way to generate clean energy. It was similar to your technology, but with one crucial difference. They could do it at almost no cost. How so? The process used common materials, easily found anywhere on the planet. It was literally almost free energy for everyone. William paused, letting the information sink in. But can you imagine the impact of that? How many industries would be affected? How many billions in profits would vanish? Elizabeth felt a chill. What happened to those scientists? The project was classified as a national security issue and buried. The scientists were persuaded into abandon their research, all except one, Theodore Thompson. William's uncle continued researching in secret. Victor joined the conversation, keeping his voice low. But he knew he needed a different approach. That's when he discovered Tech Carter and realized that you had independently found a similar solution. That's why there was so much interest in destroying us, Elizabeth concluded. It wasn't just about the technology itself, but about preventing anyone from getting close to what Project Aurora had discovered. Exactly, William confirmed. But today that changes, because we're not just going to reveal the truth about Tech Carter, we're going to release all the data from Project Aurora. My father kept copies of everything, maybe as insurance, maybe out of remorse, and we'll never know. Michael approached the group, his eyes shining with excitement. That's why these documents are so important. They show that Mom's technology really works. Elizabeth hugged her son, feeling a wave of pride and protectiveness. How can we be sure we're doing the right thing? Because this time, we're not alone, William replied, showing his phone. On the screen, dozens of notifications flashed, messages of support from scientists, environmentalists, and public figures from around the world, all ready to defend the cause. It's time, Anna announced, appearing discreetly. The press is getting impatient. William looked at each person in the group. Everyone ready? Victor stepped forward. Elizabeth, before we go, I want you to know that no matter what happens out there, I am truly sorry. For everything. Elizabeth studied him for a moment before responding. The past can't be changed, Victor. But the future is still in our hands. Michael took his mother's hand, then hesitantly extended the other to his father. Victor accepted, it with tears in his eyes. William watched the scene with a gentle smile. We're going to make history today. Not just for Tech Carter or for Thomson Enterprises, but for all the people who have ever had their dreams stifled by those who fear change. The murmur of the auditorium grew louder on the other side of the curtains. Elizabeth took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. Years of struggle, loss, and perseverance had led to this instant. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice echoed through the speakers. Please welcome the president of Thomson Enterprises, William Thomson, and the CEO of the new Tech Carter, Elizabeth Carter. The curtains began to part, and with them, a new era was about to begin. The auditorium at Thomson Enterprises was in complete silence as William finished presenting the evidence of Project Aurora. The hundreds of people present seemed hypnotized, trying to process the implications of those extraordinary revelations. And so, William concluded, his steady voice echoing through the room, the time has come to correct the mistakes of the past. Tech Carter was not just another company destroyed by aggressive corporate practices, it was a symbol of how fear of change can stifle progress. Elizabeth rose from her chair and walked to the podium, the heels of her shoes marking each step in the attentive silence of the auditorium. 10 years ago, when I lost my company, I thought I had lost everything, but today I understand that was only the beginning of a greater journey. The giant screens behind them displayed documents, charts, and photos that told the full story, from the initial discoveries of Project Aurora to the latest developments in Tech Carter's technology. At this moment, Elizabeth continued, all the documents you are seeing, along with thousands of others, are being made publicly available on our online platform. Every aspect of the technology, every test, every proof of its viability, it's all there to be examined and verified. In the front row, Michael watched his mother with evident pride, while Victor, seated a few chairs away, kept his eyes fixed on the projected documents, occasionally jotting notes on his tablet. Suddenly a murmur began to grow in the auditorium. Journalists frantically checked their phones, and excited whispers spread through the crowd. Everyone, a reporter stood up, his face showing astonishment. The documents, they're being shared across all social media. It's incredible. Scientists from around the world are already commenting, confirming the viability of the technology. William smiled, exchanging a knowing glance with Elizabeth. Exactly as planned, the truth, once revealed, cannot be contained. At the back of the auditorium, Robert monitored online reactions on his laptop. It's working, he whispered to Anna, who was looking over his shoulder. Universities, research institutes, independent labs, they're all downloading and analyzing the data. But not all reactions were positive. A group of well-dressed executives abruptly stood up, and began to exit the auditorium, making urgent calls on their cell phones. Elizabeth recognized them, representatives of the same corporations that had pressured for the destruction of Tech Carter years ago. "Now comes the hard part," William murmured to Elizabeth as camera flashes went off non-stop. "They'll try to discredit everything." "Let them try," Elizabeth replied with a confident smile. "This time, we are prepared." As if to confirm his words, the screens behind them changed, displaying a series of live video calls. Renowned scientists from different countries, all ready to defend and validate the technology. "And now," William returned to the microphone, "I would like to introduce someone who has a unique perspective on all of this. Someone who has known this story from the very beginning." The doors at the back of the auditorium opened, and a man with graying hair entered, causing an immediate stir. William felt his throat tighten with emotion. It was the first time he had seen his Uncle Theodore in person in decades. Theodore Thompson walked slowly down the central aisle, his eyes briefly meeting Victor's before settling on Elizabeth. When he reached the stage, he took the microphone with slightly trembling hands. "My name is Theodore Thompson," he began, his voice carrying the weight of years of secrets. "And it's time to tell the true story of Project Aurora." The auditorium fell into absolute silence once again, all attention focused on the man who had spent decades in hiding but was now ready to reveal everything. Backstage, Michael held his mother's hand, while Victor discreetly approached, completing a long broken family circle. Theodore's next words would change everything, not just for the people in that auditorium, but for the entire world. "Project Aurora was born from a dream," Theodore began, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "A dream of clean, accessible energy for all. But we quickly discovered that some dreams are dangerous, not because they are impossible, but because they are too possible." The auditorium remained in absolute silence, dozens of cameras broadcasting every word live to the world. In the front row, William watched his uncle with a mix of admiration and sadness, thinking of all the lost years. "When I was forced to abandon the original project, I thought my mission was over. I changed my name, built a new life away from the spotlight. But then..." Theodore looked directly at Elizabeth. "Then Tech Carter emerged, developing something so similar, yet so much more advanced than we ever achieved." Elizabeth felt a shiver as she noticed the genuine admiration in the man's voice. Theodore continued, "I should have reached out, offered help. Instead, I let fear and paranoia consume me. I used Victor." He paused, looking at his former student, "to try to control something that should never have been controlled." At the back of the auditorium, Robert continued to monitor the online reactions. "It's incredible," he whispered to Anna. "The stocks of the world's largest energy companies are plummeting, while renewable energy startups are skyrocketing." Theodore pulled an old folder from his briefcase. "These are my original journals from Project Aurora. Every detail, every discovery, every threat we received." He handed them to Elizabeth. "They belong to you now. You managed to achieve what we only dreamed of." Michael, who had remained quiet until then, stood up. "But why now? Why did you decide to show up after so long?" Theodore smiled gently at the boy. "Because I realized I was making the same mistake twice. In the past, I let fear silence me. When I saw Tech Carter emerge, I let that same fear turn me into what I feared most." William stepped closer to the podium. "And now? What happens when the people who tried to suppress this technology fight back?" "Now?" Theodore smiled, gesturing broadly to the screens showing the global impact. "Now it's too late for them. The truth is out there, being verified and validated by thousands of independent scientists. There's no putting the genie back in the bottle." Elizabeth took the microphone, her voice carrying renewed strength. "The new Tech Carter won't just be a company. It will be an open platform for collaboration. Every aspect of the technology will be developed transparently, with contributions from researchers worldwide." Victor, who had remained silent, finally spoke up. "And I would like to make an announcement." He walked to the stage, stopping beside Elizabeth. "As part of my process of redemption, I am donating all my shares and patents related to the technology to an independent research fund managed by an international committee of scientists." The auditorium erupted in applause. Michael looked at his parents with a new understanding. It wasn't just about technology or business. It was about people choosing to do the right thing, even when it was hard. William watched the scene with satisfaction. Thomson Enterprises was changing its legacy, transforming decades of aggressive corporate practices into something positive. His father might not have approved, but the future no longer belonged to those who tried to control progress. Ladies and gentlemen, Elizabeth returned to the microphone, this is just the beginning. In the coming months, we will launch pilot projects in underserved communities, proving that clean and affordable energy isn't just a dream. It's a fundamental right. Theodore stepped closer to Victor and Elizabeth, tears in his eyes. Forgive me, all of you. I spent so much time trying to protect this technology that I forgot its true purpose, to help people. Michael, in a spontaneous gesture, embraced the older man. It's never too late to do the right thing. The cameras continued to capture every moment, while on the screens the numbers kept climbing. Millions of downloads of the documents, thousands of scientists offering to collaborate, hundreds of communities applying for the pilot projects. Let's do this right this time, William declared, looking at the group gathered on stage. Not as competitors or enemies, but as partners in something greater than all of us. Elizabeth looked at her son, at Victor, at Theodore, and finally at William. Years of struggle and hardship had led to this moment. And now, finally, the future seemed bright, not just for them, but for everyone. 3 months after the historic press conference, the headquarters of the new tech Carter was a hub of constant activity. The building, located in a revitalized tech district of New York, symbolized the transformation the company had undergone. Transparent glass walls, solar panels covering every available surface, and a large vertical garden that naturally purified the building's air. Elizabeth walked through the bustling corridors, observing with satisfaction the scientists and engineers from different countries who were now part of her team. In one of the meeting rooms, through the glass walls, she could see Michael presenting a school project on renewable energy to a visiting class. At 12 years old, he already displayed the same passion for innovation as his mother. The results from the first pilot project are in. William met her in the hallway, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. The community in Harlem reduced their energy costs by 85% in the first month, and most importantly, the entire system was built and is maintained by the residents themselves. Elizabeth smiled, taking the report from his hands. And the safety tests. All positive. The Independent International Commission confirmed the technology is not only safe, it's more stable than any other energy source currently in use. They entered a conference room where Victor and Theodore were bent over blueprints and diagrams. The dynamic between the two had shifted, from manipulator and manipulated to true research partners. Elizabeth, William, Theodore greeted them, his face more cheerful than 3 months ago, as if the weight of secrets had aged him more than time itself. You need to see this. Victor found a way to simplify the installation process even further. Victor pointed to the diagrams. With these modifications, anyone with basic training can install and maintain the system. We're democratizing not just energy, but knowledge. Speaking of knowledge, Robert entered the room, carrying his ever-present laptop. Our collaborative portal has surpassed 1 million registered users. Researchers from around the world are contributing improvements and adaptations for different contexts. Elizabeth approached the window, gazing at the city stretching out to the horizon. New York, with its sea of buildings and glaring inequalities, was becoming the grand laboratory for their technology. Every week, more communities adopted the system, creating a network of clean, accessible energy that grew organically. "Mom!" Michael ran into the room, his eyes shining with excitement. "You'll need to see what my class has prepared. We made a model showing how technology can be implemented across the city." Elizabeth hugged her son, feeling a wave of pride. The transformation in Michael over the past few months had been remarkable, fear and insecurity giving way to a contagious enthusiasm for the future. "And that's not all," William added, smiling at the boy. "Michael, do you want to tell them about the educational program?" Michael nodded enthusiastically. "We're creating science clubs in public schools. Students learn about renewable energy and help their communities implement the technology. We already have 10 schools participating. The next generation won't just use this technology, Victor observed, a proud smile on his face. They'll improve it and take it to places we can't even imagine. Anna entered the room with a serious expression. Gentlemen, the attempts at interference haven't completely stopped. We just received another legal notice from one of the big oil companies. Let them try, William replied calmly. There's no turning back now. The technology is in the hands of the people. And that's why we'll win, Theodore added, his voice carrying the wisdom of someone who had seen both sides of the battle. We're not just creating clean energy, we're creating hope. And against hope, even the most powerful are powerless. Elizabeth looked at the group gathered in the room, her extended family, united by something greater than blood ties. Each person there had been transformed by the journey of the past few months. Victor had found redemption through service to others. Theodore had overcome decades of fear and paranoia. William had transformed his family's legacy. And Michael was growing up in a world where doing the right thing wasn't just possible. It was necessary. The next step, Elizabeth announced, is to expand beyond Brazil. We already have invitations from governments in Africa and Asia. They've seen what we've accomplished here and want to replicate the model. And this time, William added, no one will stop us. Through the window, the sun began to set over New York, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. It was the end of another workday, but just the beginning of a new era. A year had passed since the groundbreaking press conference that changed everything. The auditorium at Tech Carter was once again packed, but this time for a celebration. In the front row, Elizabeth watched with pride as Michael, now 13 years old, presented the results of the first year of the educational program to an international audience. In just 12 months, Michael spoke with a confidence surprising. For his age, our science clubs have expanded from 10 to 200 schools. Over 5,000 students are directly involved in implementing and improving technology in their communities. William, seated beside Elizabeth, smiled as he watched. The boy who so resembled his mother, the same passion, the same determination. Thomson Enterprises had completely transformed under his leadership, abandoning old predatory practices to become a model of sustainable innovation. And now, Michael continued, I am pleased to introduce our newest project, the Global Network of Young Innovators in Clean Energy. The screens behind him displayed a world map where glowing dots indicated all the schools participating in the program, not just in Brazil, but in dozens of countries. Victor, who coordinated the educational project, stood up to join his son on stage. Each point on this map, Victor explained, represents not just a school, but an entire community transforming. Our youth are not just learning about technology, they are becoming agents of change. In the audience, Theodore discreetly wiped away a tear. Beside him, Robert typed furiously on his laptop, updating in real time the impressive numbers of the program. Millions of people benefited, billions in energy savings, tons of carbon emissions avoided. Anna, now the head of public relations, at Tech Carter, watched everything with satisfaction. The attempts at sabotage and interference had drastically decreased in recent months. It was hard to fight against something that had become a global movement. After the presentation, during the reception, Elizabeth found a quiet moment with William in the company's vertical garden. The sun was setting over New York, creating a spectacle of colors in the sky. Sometimes it still feels like a dream, Elizabeth commented, observing the solar panels covering the neighboring buildings, all installed with Tech Carter technology. A year ago, I was desperate, searching for my son in the rain. William gently took her hand. In recent months, their relationship had blossomed into something deeper than a professional partnership. Sometimes the greatest transformations begin in the darkest moments. Michael approached them, accompanied by Victor and Theodore. The boy carried an old folder, the original journals of Project Aurora, now part of the company's historical archive. You know what's most amazing? Michael asked, flipping through the yellowed pages. All of this started with a dream. Uncle Theodore's dream of clean energy for everyone, Mum's dream of making a difference, Uncle William's dream of transforming his family's legacy. "And your dream, Michael?" Victor asked his son, his voice filled with affection. "What is it?" Michael looked toward the horizon where the city lights were beginning to turn on. "My dream is to continue what you all started. Not just the technology, but the idea that we can make a difference. That we don't have to accept the world as it is." Elizabeth embraced her son, feeling her heart overflow with love and pride. In a year, so much had changed, not just in the world around them, but within each of them. Victor had become the father Michael had always needed. Theodore had found peace in seeing his work finally benefit humanity. William had transformed his family's empire into a force for good. "The future," William said, looking at the gathered group, "belongs to people like Michael, young people who aren't afraid to dream big and work for their convictions. And the best part," Theodore added, "is that this is just the beginning. Each new generation will take this technology further, will find new uses, new possibilities." Elizabeth's phone buzzed. It was a message from Robert. Another community had achieved complete energy independence using TechCarter's technology. Another victory, another step toward the future they had dreamed of. "You know what makes me proudest," Elizabeth said, looking at each face around her. Her family, united not by blood, but by a common purpose. It's not just the numbers, the technical achievements, it's seeing how each person here has grown, transformed, found their true purpose. Michael smiled, his eyes shining with the same idealism that had driven his mother so many years ago. "And this is just the beginning, isn't it?" "Yes, my son," Elizabeth replied, hugging him again. "This is just the beginning." On the horizon, the lights of New York shone brighter than ever, powered by clean and accessible energy, a living testament to how dreams, when shared and nurtured, can transform the world.